Today's Cardinals Countdown is brought to you by Sanderson Ford and powered by the Ford F-150. Check it out at sandersonford.com. This is ABC15's Cardinals Countdown.
Well, another happy Monday, folks. We welcome you out to our Week 3 edition of Cards Countdown, coming to you live once again from Four Peaks Brewing Company in Tempe. Jason Snavely alongside Tom Tenner and Shane Dale. Guys, another huge one to talk about. 47-7, the final. Cards over the 49ers. A 40-burger this week, guys. Could it look any better than that?
I don't think so. I think if you're a Cardinal fan, this is as good as you could expect the first 3 weeks to go, maybe better, because you have to put this in some sort of historical context that they are breaking records. They're doing things that teams in the NFL haven't done before, let alone teams in Arizona named the Cardinals. So it's very exciting. 3 games into it, we all know that this hasn't been the toughest competition in the NFL, but they've destroyed all 3 of these teams, and they've impressed everybody. There's a lot of national media at that game yesterday as well, and I was talking to some of them after the game, and you could just tell the overall vibe of the team is changing.
Yeah.
Remember, it was about a month ago when Sports Illustrated said they would finish last in their division.
Yep.
They're defying some of those expectations, but great win, great exciting day, but I think we all know Bruce Arians is going to turn the page rather quickly.
Was it the Sports Illustrated guy? He's the one that said they'd win their first 2, and then
you're right. No. That this was going to be the beginning of their 10-game losing streak starting yesterday. So great start for the Cardinals. I think everybody, you can just feel the vibe throughout the city.
Yeah.
People are fired up about this team right now.
47 points, the most points ever scored for the Cardinals versus the 49ers. A huge win. Shane, what was your takeaway?
I'm just sitting through these ridiculous stats here. There's so many crazy numbers to go through, and the Cardinals do a great job of letting us know, so we can report them to you. Here's the one that stood out most to me. Only 3 teams in NFL history scored more points in their first 3 games than the Cardinals have. They scored 126 points in their first 3 games. The Dallas Cowboys in 1968 scored 132. A couple other teams scored 127. That's it.
Yeah.
No other team. Only those 3 teams scored more points than the Cardinals in their first
NFL history.
Ever.
That's an average of 42 points a game.
And NFL history goes back a ways.
Yeah.
Right, and then when you look at what the Cardinals are averaging, 42 points a game right now. Yeah. I mean, there's a handful of other teams that are maybe at 30, but 42 points a game, 17 touchdowns in 3 games, which is the most in the NFL since 1968. You go on and on and on.
And the Cardinals are the only NFL team to not trail at any point of any game this season.
Is that right?
That's right.
This guy up here. Just
the Cardinals set it up for us.
The computer, you're a cheater. But speaking of these numbers, let's take a look at these overall statistics. Now, guys, the last 2 weeks we've looked at wins, and the numbers were relatively close. This is the first week of the season where it is just staggeringly lopsided. 49ers racked up a total of 156 yards compared to the Cardinals' 446 total yards. 49ers pass yards, 67.
That is so glaring.
Oh my gosh, compared to Carson Palmer.
At one point he had 5 completions and 4 interceptions.
That's right. I think he ended with, we'll talk about the QB battle in a little bit, but I think it was 13 completed passes. 4 of those were to Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals racked up 311 pass yards. The rushing game was fairly even, but the huge glaring statistic, 49ers with 4 turnovers compared to the Cardinals 1. Guys, we want to get your take on yesterday's huge win. 602-685-3017. The phone lines are going to be open for the next hour. 602-685-3017. We're also going to take a look at some of your game day picks here in a little bit. Some of them are great. But guys, looking at those numbers, again, it's really the first time where it was just a blowout.
Yeah, it was. And here's the difference between the Cardinals and really every other team in the league, because we all know New England is great, all right? I mean, if you're looking at 1-2 in the NFL, I'd say that's probably the pecking order, the Cardinals and New England, the way people look at them. But the Cardinals have a defense that looks to score, right? I mean, that is an attack defense playing on fire right now at a different speed and level from other teams, but they look to score. That secondary, they want to make plays. It's kind of interesting watching them evolve, talking to them. There's some internal competition about, they literally talk about scoring points in a game, and it happened yesterday. Boy, before you know it, Carson Palmer has a 14-point lead. That takes a lot of pressure off a quarterback. 14 zip before the game started. Last week it was 7 zip.
Just going to say,
before the game really got started.
In a row that they have a cushion before they really get things going. I mean, how big is that to get that cushion before really taking the field.
You want to crush souls. You do a couple back-to-back pick sixes is the way to do it. The Cardinals defense outscored the 49ers Sunday 14-7. That's the best way to do it. And we talk about Colin Kaepernick obviously not having a good day, and the Cardinals defense is dominating. One thing we haven't really talked about a lot is the Cardinals rushing defense. Stopping Carlos Hyde, limiting him to under 60 rushing yards. Carlos Hyde came into the game as the NFL's leading rusher after 2 weeks. So the Cardinals running game on both sides. The Cardinals rushing offense, it was great with Chris Johnson as well. 100 yards, 2 touchdowns for him. So all the talk about Larry Fitzgerald having a great game. The Cardinals defense returning interceptions for touchdowns. The running game to me, especially the Cardinals rushing defense, was huge.
All right, we have a caller on the line right now. Let's hear from Sean from Tempe. Sean, how's it going, bud?
Yeah, hey guys. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
It's going all right. Hey, I've been a Cardinals fan a long time. Super excited about the start this year. Tom, you may know this a little bit better than the other guys. I'm nervous. I'm a Cardinals fan. I'm nervous. I don't want to believe it's as simple as if Carson stays healthy that we're going to be this good. What are you guys' thoughts? Are we going to be all right this year?
Okay, basically, can they keep doing this is the question,
Right.
I think. So good question. And here's my take on that. I don't think what we've seen the first 3 weeks is a fluke. I really don't. And then the other things you have to look at, how does the schedule shape up?
Yeah.
Okay, and before the season, the talk was this is one of the tougher schedules in the NFL because we know the NFC West is supposed to be tough, and then they were playing the AFC North. So Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Baltimore. The Ravens are 0-3. Pittsburgh has lost Roethlisberger. They might be back, but he's probably going to miss the Cardinal game.
Almost definitely.
So when a team has a special season, which is what everybody's hoping is going to happen here in the Valley for the Cardinals, variables have to happen. Different things have to fall into place.
Absolutely.
There has to be some luck involved, all right? Just like the Patriots. They had to get lucky with that court case over the summer to get Brady on the field.
Right.
Worked out for them. Things are working out for the Cardinals. And it's okay, fans. I think you can really, really think that this team could be special this year.
Yeah.
So far, it's looking that way.
That was a great question from Sean from Tempe. You have to look at it. 3 wins right off the bat. Let's fast forward to, say, the end of the season. How were those teams that they just beat these first 3 weeks going to be remembered? The Saints, Bears, and 49ers. They could be looked at as really weak links, and you could maybe take those wins with a grain of salt. We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
However, they've done exactly what they've needed to do.
None of them are playoff teams, I don't think. I don't think you're going to see any of them in the playoffs at the end of the season. But yeah, I think one of the differences between this year and last, because the Cardinals started 9-1 last year, but they won a lot of games, a lot of very tight games. Okay, and against good teams, which we haven't really seen yet. But the Cardinals are just decimating opponents this season. Last year, there were a lot of close games, and good teams find ways to win close games. But the Cardinals are doing everything you would expect a good team to do to a below-average team. So I think you can gain that much from the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, and Jason, the Cardinals don't have to apologize for any of these teams they're beating. They're on their
absolutely
schedule.
right.
The problem would be if they lost to one of them, all right? That's inexcusable, and you can't recover from that.
Or even trail to.
But the most important thing for this team is how they handle their success, okay? Because they made it look easy yesterday. And my thought being at that game, guys, yesterday was more like an entertainment event than an athletic contest.
Like pro wrestling.
With
The outcome is determined.
The
right?
noise,
WWE.
the energy. You were just waiting, okay, how's the next score going to happen? Who's going to do it? They completely dominated on both sides of the ball. They humiliated Colin Kaepernick. And it won't be that easy. But the way Arians whips those guys back into reality and will not let them linger over anything really good or bad, I think is the most important thing about this team this year.
Well, right after the game, when they come into the locker room, what does Bruce Arians say to them? You guys still ain't blank, but you're starting to smell a little better.
And you know what? There's some things that are going to show up on tape that weren't perfect yesterday as well. So they're going to have some teachable moments, some coachable moments. It wasn't a flawless performance by any means. And he's like, there's so much talent on that team, but there's still competition, for positions and to play. You can't really make a lot of mistakes.
And Carson Palmer even said after the game, and he's a perfectionist, he said, we're not as good as we can be. We have things we need to work on. I love that. We're not resting our laurels. We just beat a team by 40 points. We can get a lot better. I love that attitude, and I love Bruce Arians' attitude. Like, you guys haven't accomplished anything, because guess what? They haven't done anything yet.
I feel like it's great to have a roster jam-packed of perfectionists because, they'll just strive to do. I mean, you look at yesterday's game, it's pretty tough to pick some glaring mistakes. It was just a well-rounded.
The Carson Palmer pass toward the end of the first half, which he just heaved up there, I guess was trying to throw out of bounds.
Right.
That was probably like the one big mistake for
of
Sunday.
4 quarters.
That's about it, I think.
Yeah. All right, guys, I've got a really tough question to pose to you guys. After the first 3 weeks of the season, what's been more impressive? the Cardinals offense or the Cardinals defense. You could make a
Sure.
strong argument for either side.
I'll pick one. I'll say the defense because brand new defensive coordinator. You knew the offense was going to be good.
Right.
Okay, we knew that Carson Palmer healthy, they're going to put points up, and they were going to, do things that they want on the field. But the fact that the defense is playing as well as they have, they're scoring points, turnovers, big plays. I'm going to give it up for the defense right now.
Yeah.
That not only the most surprising, but I think they've been the most impressive aspect of the team so far.
I know you like to be a contrarian, Tom, but 126 points. I know some of those were scored by the defense, but it's one of the I'm still kind of taking a wait and see approach with this defense, just because they haven't been tested too much just yet. Colin Kaepernick was just throwing ridiculous passes on Sunday. Jay Cutler missed half the game.
Right place at the right time, though.
Right. No, and that's true. Jay Cutler missed half the game, the Bears game. Alshon Jeffrey, they didn't have to face Alshon Jeffrey, so and as far as the offense, I'm looking through some of these stats. They've scored at least one touchdown in 9 consecutive quarters. They scored at least 14 points in 6 of their last 9 quarters. They haven't been outscored in any quarter this season. I just think, in terms of the running game, the Cardinals, they've run for at least 115 yards each of their first 3 games, the first time since 1988 when they were the Phoenix Cardinals. Okay, so the defense has made some big plays. I'm not as sold on the defense, Tom, right now as I am on the offense. That's just me.
As I said, you can make an argument for either, but in a lot of teams, the defense would absolutely win, hands down. But if we weren't talking about a historical 3 weeks of a season for the Cardinals offense, back-to-back weeks scoring 40-plus points for the first time since 1969, just the numbers don't lie. This offense is doing things that has never been done in football.
Yep, and kind of a makeshift offensive line as well. They got Bobby Massey back yesterday, which was good. And I think Upati's going to be back this week. So they're going to be back at full strength on the offensive line. They clearly have some depth now up there. So that was a huge question mark. We all knew that going into the season. Carson Palmer was sacked for the first time yesterday. There was a point in the second quarter where I was tweeting out, "Hey, the offensive line needs to get their act together."
Right.
They had a few penalties. And the other thing that worries me is the way the Cardinals have been dominating teams. Some of these, we talked about this last night at 10 o'clock. Should the Cardinals have pulled Carson Palmer in the fourth quarter? I was waiting for the 49ers to really let this game get out of control and be completely chippy. Personal fouls yesterday. And I think that's something that the Cardinals really have to watch for, because the way they are dominating, it's going to frustrate teams. And I think that might, transpire with a lot of penalties and cheap shots in the end of some games.
One storyline heading into yesterday, as you mentioned, Bobby Massey coming in, would it kind of mess up that chemistry that had looked so good on the front line the first 2 weeks of the season? I was really watching that, and early on, as you mentioned, Bobby Massey blew an assignment. They didn't look very strong in the second quarter. I was getting a little worried because, as we mentioned last week, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it was a little surprising to see Bruce go with Massey right away.
Yeah.
Especially considering it was his own fault for being suspended those first 2 weeks.
Well, and Arian said earlier in the week that whoever starter is the starter, they're not going to be replaced. So even I was thinking, early in the game, okay, well maybe bring in Earl Watford, but you know what? If Massey's doing this thing, he's got to get adjusted to the offense again. He didn't play much. He didn't play with the first team during training camp. It's just going to take a little while. And Bruce Arians, it's probably going to be that way with Mike Upati as well next week. So you got to give it a little bit of time, more than just a half, to just make a knee-jerk reaction and get this guy out of it. And it worked out great. Like Carson Palmer was sacked I think once, first sack they've given up all season. Chris Johnson, we haven't even talked about Chris Johnson yet. My gosh, had 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns.
Right.
So I have no complaints. I overreacted to how the offensive line performed in preseason. I admit it. They looked so bad that I just thought, maybe this team isn't a playoff team.
Right.
I've changed my mind.
Did you see this stat? Okay, so Chris Johnson went over 100 yesterday. Career 100-yard game since 2008. He only trails Adrian Peterson by like 2. Yeah. Like career 100-yard games. Chris Johnson is a great running back.
How is this guy a free agent? I know that he just turned 30 this past week, but how How does no one want a guy who can still rush for 4 yards a carry? Do you know how valuable it is in the NFL to have a guy who can rush for 4 yards a carry? You don't take that kind of thing for granted. The Cardinals didn't have anyone close to that last year.
The thing that held Johnson back with other teams was that thing that went on in the offseason with the drive-by shooting.
Yeah.
Okay, and number two, he wanted a lot of money. He wanted a lot of money from some of these other teams, longer-term contracts. The Cardinals gave him the one-year deal, which is the new trend in the NFL. You make these veterans, you sign them one-year deals, and when you get them on the line like that, boy, and he still has it. I mean, when he caught that little swing pass yesterday and busted it up the seam, I mean, you could see that speed. He almost took it to the house, made it inside the 5-yard line. But what a weapon! And I just love the way the Cardinals have built this team with speed being, such a key factor at every single position, at least in the skill position.